Hello there, my name's Gary Sims and this is Gary Explains. Now I'm always on the lookout for a good SBC single board computer, one that could maybe rival the Raspberry Pi in terms of price, performance, functionality and ecosystem. Now I've got hold of a device called the Orange Pi Zero3. It was the Zero 3 part that I liked because it's the low end of these SBCs, the zero end, kind of like the Raspberry Pi Zero. Very good price. You can get them for around $20. We'll talk more about that later. So I've been putting it through the paces, working out what you can and can't do with it, and I've discovered quite a few things. I'd like to share those things with you. So if you want to find out more, please let me explain. Okay, so this is the Orange Pi Zero3. Obviously, Orange Pi is a take on Raspberry Pi. They've changed Raspberry to Orange, and this Chinese company has lots of boards in their range, and this is one of the newer ones, the Zero3. The idea of the Zero, the cheaper low-end one, is what attracted me to it. So what does it have in it? It has an all-winner H618 quad-core Cortex A53 processor, clocked at 1.5 gigahertz with a Mali G31 MP2, and the Mali G31 MP2 supports all of these standards, but we'll talk more about this in a little bit because you're not necessarily going to get support for all of these. It comes in 4 different models. You can get a 1 gig version and a 2 gig version and a 4 gig version, and I like this, a 1.5 gig version. I think that's quite a good idea because here at the low end, this really is where you can save some money if you're trying to make an application, but maybe you need that a little bit more, but you don't quite need 2 gig. That gives you the option. I think that's quite a good idea. You get Wi-Fi 5, Bluetooth 5, and a Gigabit Ethernet port. Now it comes with USB 2.0 and there are 3 ports in total. However, only one of them is physically on the board. The 2 of them you have to plug in the cables. Literally you have to get one and plug in cables onto the pins that are on the board. So only one of them is actually an actual has a socket, which means you're going to need a USB hub. If you want to use a mouse and a keyboard, then you're going to need a USB hub. It's powered by USB-C and you need at least 5 volts at 3 amps. And for video, it has a micro HDMI port. Now, of course, with HDMI, you've got mini HDMI, micro HDMI, and the full-size HDMI. And we'll talk more about that in a minute because I think the positioning on it on the board is a little bit strange, really. We'll talk about that in a minute. So here's the board looking at it with all the different things. So there's that micro HDMI port I was talking about there. This is the Wi-Fi antenna. There is the USB Type-C power. There's your single USB port. As I said, you'll need a hub if you want to do a mouse and keyboard. There's the wired Ethernet port. It's got a Gigabit Ethernet chip there. Here is where it gives you the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth. And there's some LEDs here. As I said, there's the Wi-Fi, and here is the RAM. And basically here of course is the CPU, the all-winner H618, and you've got these pins here. There's 26 pins there. It's not compatible with Raspberry Pi in any way. It's just they're there, and there's a pin out that shows you. Obviously the ones here in red are 5 volts, black are ground, and so on. And there's this other set of pins here, which we'll talk about a little later, that give you some other kind of analog things. That's where you connect the USB 2, for example. You connect it to those ports there. And here is that pin out. And so there is, as you can see, I2C, GPIO, you've got a serial port, the UART, you've got SPI, you've got all the standard things you would expect, including 5 volts and ground. And then on this side, you've got those extra analog ports, you've got an IR receiver, you've got a TV out, you've got line out left and right, and you've got your extra 2 USB ports. This isn't USB 3, that's the 3rd USB port. And then you've got 5 volts and ground there as well. So talking about that micro HDMI, I've got one of these fancy connectors that gives me micro, mini and full. And of course, if I put this one on, it just so happens that it blocks. I can't now plug in the USB-C power. So it would have been good if they put this over here or somewhere completely separate where it's not near any other ports. Now, I suppose, yes, you could argue what happens if my port was the other way around. Yes, it's true. But when I even used an adapter like this, which is just a standard kind of plastic one, there wasn't enough room here to stick in the USB-C. So in the end, I had to use one with a long cable on it. And so the port here, the plug at this end was quite small, and then it now enabled me to have enough room to plug that in. So there's a gotcha. I thought, oh, I'll just get the cables out of my box that I've already got, the adapters that I've already got, and it'll all work. but you have to make sure you've got one of these ones with a long cable on it, otherwise you're going to have problems. Just something to watch out for. As I say, if they put that port somewhere else, there's a whole load of space over here, that would have made life a lot easier, I reckon. Now, when it comes to software here, the potential is enormous. I mean, this list is really quite impressive. You've got Arch 2307, so that's a rolling distribution, and it's July 2023, so I'm making this video just halfway through August, so that's absolutely brilliant. You've got the long-term support versions of Ubuntu 20.04 and 22.04, so that's really good. And you've also got 22.04 with the Linux kernel 6.1, and that's replicated also in Debian. So this is desktop and server for all of these. Debian 11 and Debian 11 and 12 with kernel 6.1, and then your Android 12. So if you just looked at it like that, you'd say, this is fantastic. This is, whatever I choose. I use Arch Linux, by the way, or no, I like using pure old Debian. So, I mean, whatever you want. But I've tried them all out. I've literally, so you don't have to do this, I've installed them all and tried them all out, and I've got some things to say. So stay tuned. We've got some things to say about that. Now, the first thing is, will this software get updated? So let's look at some of the other boards that Orange Pi have got. Now, these are all their long-term support boards. So some of their boards have come and gone. They produce them for a couple of years and then they don't make them anymore. Fair enough. But these are the ones that they call long-term support. Some of these have been around in manufacture for 3-4 years, maybe more. So what's the story? Well, their R1 plus long-term support. It has Ubuntu and Debian images. The last time it was updated February 22. That's the image. Now, obviously, I think the updates that have been coming through, trickling down, are there. But that's it. You're not going to get anything other than those versions of Ubuntu. They've not upgraded to the latest versions, and that's it. And the same with the Orange Pi 3 long-term support. You get these two, and it was last updated in September 2022. Not so bad, but still almost a year ago. And again, I'm sure there have been updates that you can get through updating the distribution, but you're not going to get the latest versions. And the same with the Pi Zero3. The version that came out when it was basically made available, that's what you get with the security updates. However, with the Pi Zero3, you also get Arch July 2023. Now, that's interesting for two reasons. One, of course, is this Pi 2 uses almost the same, just a slight variation on the CPU that you find in the Pi Zero3. And secondly, this means because it's a rolling update, they're able to keep that going. Now, that gave me kind of some hope that, if you pick an Orange Pi board that's got Arch support, then maybe you're going to kind of keep getting the latest versions. But again, I've got more to say about this. We'll see what happens. Now, once I had it all up and running, this is actually running, I did these tests with it running Arch Linux, 64-bit version of Arch Linux. I did some performance testing. So what have we got here? This is one of my many benchmarks that you'll find in my GitHub repository, and these are for my Sublec compiler. That's a test. I've not even made a video about it if you're interested, but basically the quicker the test completes, the faster the CPU, and you can see a very nice graph here actually following exactly what we would expect. What do I mean by that? Well, the top one here is the Raspberry Pi Zero3 running 64 bits with 4 Cortex A53s clocked at 1 GHz. It takes 84 seconds for that test to complete. Now we go down to our Orange Pi Zero3. It's also got 4 Cortex A53 cores, but it's running at 1.5 GHz. So you can see already, look at that, you can see that 1 GHz, 1.5 GHz, you can see almost linear there. That takes only 56 seconds. That's absolutely what you'd expect. However, of course, there are faster boards and faster CPUs out there. Of course, they do cost different amounts of money. The Zero is about kind of, was it $10, $15 I think they sell it for. This, we'll talk about the price. It starts at like $15, $16. So these are in the same area. Now, the Jetson Nano's got the Cortex A57. That's the bigger version that came out together with the A53, the high performance one. And it's also clocked at 1.43 gigahertz. Now, of course, it's faster. And that's mainly because it's the A57 rather than the A53. So you can see the A53 is an inline CPU, doesn't do branch prediction or anything like that. The Cortex A53 is out of order, does branch prediction and so on. So you can see it's faster. And then you get to a Pi 4, which has got a Cortex A72. That does branch prediction. It's an out of order pipeline and so on. Running at 1.8 gigahertz, it's faster still. And then when you get to the Rock 5B, it's got 4 Cortex A76 cores and more generated, clocked to 2.2 gigahertz. It's actually an octa-core. It's also got 4 Cortex A55, but this is for single thread performance, and it does it in 13.5. Of course, these are all different prices, but there you can go. So it does fit exactly where I'd expect it to fit in the performance range. Now, some things to note that I discovered as I installed all the different bits of software and everything, starting with Arch. One problem is the mirror didn't work that was set up in there. I tried to install packages and it was like the mirror was unavailable. Was it a temporary thing? I don't know. I didn't have time to try it again after a week or whatever. So I had to add in another mirror manually. That seemed to work and I was then able to add in some extra stuff. But I couldn't install wiring for Orange Pi. Now, wiring is a popular library that allows you to talk to the GPIO pins in a kind of an agnostic way. You can run it on the Raspberry Pi, you can run it on other software, and you kind of, as long as you're using this API for wiring, then you're going to be able to support lots of different small single board computers. And they do have a version of wiring for the Orange Pi, but I could install it on Arch. However, on Ubuntu, I was able to install it, and I was able to write a C program that blinks an LED, and here we can see it running. And in fact, the little program actually blinks all the pins, so you can actually, it's a great way of testing all the pins, and you can see here, as I move the cable around, all the pins are working and they're flashing that LED. However, on the downside, it did crash quite a lot. In fact, at one point I was doing a screen recording just using the Orange Pi configuration program, and then you can see it just crashed and then it started to reboot, and that happened several times. So, you know, what does that mean? Well, other ones like Arch didn't crash, so I'm suspecting it's Ubuntu, but yes, and I should probably install it on another 5 SD cards to make sure there's not that problem and blah, blah, blah. But while I was using it, while only using Ubuntu, it did crash. And then it does also support Android, and it wouldn't boot. I tried it several times. I tried flashing it several times, downloading it several times, it just wouldn't boot. So maybe they'll update that. I don't know, maybe I've got a problem. But this is the problem with these boards that don't have such a good ecosystem. The Raspberry Pi is a fantastic ecosystem, and there are people that work night and day to make sure that it is as user-friendly as possible. These other boards, they do have an ecosystem, but they're not quite so polished. So you're always going to run into problems. And here's the sad bit. The Mali GPU and the hardware video codecs, that's for, you know, hardware decode and all that, are only fully supported under Android. Why? Of course, because Android, a lot of phones use the Mali GPU. So you've got Android support for the Mali GPU. And so that's why it's going to work. But you don't get that. You've got kind of the best fit drivers they've got that won't have the hardware acceleration under Ubuntu, under Debian. I was getting full HD, but you know, you're not going to get hardware video decoding and so on. It's just not supported, and they say that in the documentation. Talking of documentation, one plus side, and I was quite impressed by this, is there's a 300-page user manual which covers many topics like Docker, face recognition demos, Android TV, and so on. And this manual is really quite good. They've done a really good job. So maybe there's stuff in here. Look at this HDMI stuff, and there's the Bluetooth stuff, and audio setup, SPI, I2C, GPIO. So they really do go into this. So, you know, it's not all bad. They've obviously put in the time and effort. Maybe this is fairly new board, so maybe it will improve. Maybe some of these images that I've downloaded will get better. They do seem to point out things that when they do work and when they don't work. So I am impressed by the fact there is this big manual, and maybe you should take that as a plus point when you're considering this board. So what about the price? That's all important for a low-end board. And when I say low-end, of course, I'm comparing it to, you know, the Jetson Nano, the Raspberry Pi 4 with 8 gigabytes of RAM or something that's going to cost you quite a lot. So the prices have changed a little bit from when I bought it. It's actually a bit cheaper at the moment, whether that's because there's a sale on or something, I don't know. So these are a rough guideline. They may go up or down by $2, $3, $4 over time, but the Orange Pi Zero3 with 1 gigabyte of RAM is $15. So that's aimed squarely at the same kind of place as the Raspberry Pi Zero 2, which also comes with a quad core, as I said, Cortex-A53. It's got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and so on. And then as you go up, you can keep adding RAM, 1.5 gigabytes, 2 gigabytes, 4 gigabyte version, you get to $25. Now, I paid $7 for shipping, and it took 4 weeks to get to me directly from the official AliExpress shop that the Orange Pi people have there. So would I recommend the Orange Pi Zero 3? Well, basically there are two sides to this coin. If you're an avid collector of single board computers like me, because I've got all those boards, the Rock 5B and the Jetson Nano and the Raspberry Pi 4 and a Raspberry Pi 3 and a Raspberry Pi Zero, and I've got some RISC-V boards. I've got the, I've got so many boards. If you're an avid collector of these boards and you like to play with another board to see what it does, then for 20 bucks, go for it. Just go and buy one. Have some fun, play with it, see what works, see what's interesting, maybe help port some software over to it, do your bit, whatever. Definitely for 20 bucks, I would recommend it. Maybe for 25 bucks plus your shipping for the 4 GB version, maybe that will be quite good. However, if you are a beginner and you just want to get started with single board computers, you want to do a bit of hardware interfacing, read from a sensor, send up the traffic to the cloud. And I've got lots of videos on how you do that, how to monitor temperature, for example, using an Arduino, using a Raspberry Pi Pico, using a Raspberry Pi, using MQTT. I've got all of this here on this channel if that's the kind of stuff that interests you. How to get into Python programming, how to get into C programming, how to just learn some kind of basic computing stuff, then get yourself a Raspberry Pi. They're getting more into stock now as I'm making this video here in August 2023. Go and get yourself a Raspberry Pi. But if you have gone beyond that stage and you're looking for something, a bit of an adventure, a bit of something to play with, then the Orange Pi Zero 3 is worth it. Okay, that's it. My name's Gary Sims. This is Gary Explains. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up. Also, you can follow me on all the trendy and not so trendy websites, social media. I suppose that Twitter should be an X sign now. Here we all are. That's where you can find me. Okay, that's it. I'll see you in the next one.